the Action City, we get ready to go racing once again in the Butt Kicker GR Cup. And today, with fog and haze in the air, I think there's no doubt that the driver is going to be full focused on getting to the front and trying to dominate on the streets of Long Beach. Welcome along, everyone, once again to RaceSpotTV, to Friday Night Primetime. My name is Arjuna Kankipati, joined alongside once again by Dara Thacker. And Dara, we were kind of having a chat before we got underway here. We're not sure how much we should expect in terms of chaos, how much we should expect in terms of great racing action.
Yeah, it's an interesting track, Long Beach, isn't it? Especially with these GR cars. Of course, we saw a fantastic race last week at Daytona. Of course, a lot more slipstream that will be taking effect there than it will here at Long Beach. But of course, you think down towards turn one, that long straight past the Pacific Ocean, we may see some overtakes down there before we get to the fountain. But it does tighten up, isn't it, in the middle section. It might be a little bit more tricky to make the moves, and we might see a little bit of collisions come into play.
You can see over there the aquarium, plenty of sights for the drivers to enjoy when they're not racing, but we're going to be fully focused on the run to the end of the season. Just 4 weeks ago after this, and we made our way into the month of May. Road Atlanta, Snetterton, and then the trip down under Sandown and Mount Panorama to close things out. And what a way to finish off the season as well, really showing the diversity and requiring the drivers to challenge themselves, Dara, by going from, you know, some of the fast, open tracks like Daytona, Sebring, into Lagos, now into a section where it's a little bit more tight, it's a little bit more tricky, and can't afford to make too many mistakes, much like we saw at the start of the season.
Yeah, it's an interesting little string of races we're in the middle of now, isn't it? Daytona, then Long Beach, then Road Atlanta, then Snetterton. 4 incredibly different circuits, so really difficult to adapt for these drivers, and it really does show who can come out on top and who is adapting the best and who can really work their way to the front. Long Beach, of course, probably the most particular racetrack on the entire calendar, being that tight street circuit. Of course, you think at the final corner, is anybody going to be able to send it through there? You'd be a brave person to do so, but you cannot rule it out. But looking forward to this, looking forward to the rest of the season as well, because all of the races look set to be really quite exciting encounters. It
hopefully will be fun, but I unfortunately have some bad news. I hate to be the bearer of it, but top of the timesheets as we sit right now, it's a bit of a margin for Ignacio Montenegro, who's got 1/10 and then 7/10 back to third position. So big gaps at the top of the field, which I think kind of tells us what we should kind of expect. A potential breakaway and drivers trying to run away, Dara, amongst the fighting slightly further behind.
Yeah, we've seen it before, haven't we, where there's been fighting in the mid-pack, fighting in behind, maybe a battle for the lead, but those guys getting a little bit isolated in the early couple of minutes of the race, and they can then try and press that advantage all the way through to the end. Of course, only 15 minutes worth of racing here at Long Beach, but it's going to be important for those guys at the front to get away, and the guys in behind, if they haven't quite got that pace, just to try and battle their way around for P3.
And a battle for the final step on the podium might end up being one that takes full center stage. Remember, rolling start means we have to run our way through the hairpin, single file, sometimes double file occasionally, before we get the race underway, hoping that we can navigate our way through safely with no major dramas. Drivers, though, have seen the qualifying session come to a close. They're now getting their instructions to head down trackside and get ready to go racing. Behind that Porsche pace car, take a look at the starting grid to see how the 18 Toyota GR86s will end up lining up. And we talked about Ignacio Montenegro being at the front. The number 1 machine will lead us to the green with a 132.301. He'll have Valentino Santero for company, and then David View and Nelson Santos share row 2 and almost a full second off of the pole position. Mario Cornis and then Magnus Dalbom, 5th and 6th spots, and continuing to see that big margin, of course, to pole position. Archie Cole, Alex Shibaev, 7th and 8th positions, with Dan Howdell and then Nicholas Grailf, 9th and 10th. Antonio Samuel, Sam Droughts, 11th and 12th, and then as you roll your way to the back end of the field, only a handful more times, and maybe not all representative. Nikita Ermishin, Alejandro Sanchez, Richard Landreville, and then Theng Wan Tathana, Ezekiel Prioto, and then Matthew Mosier, your 18 machines. I once again apologize for the weekly butchering of names that occurs here on RaceSpotTV, but it's a short run for the drivers to get themselves steeled up and ready to go. How many cars do you think will be trying to make some aggressive moves down into the opening corner, Dara?
I think there's going to be quite a few, if we're being honest, because of course there's not going to be too many other places in the opening lap to make those moves stick early, and if you're further back, if you've not quite set the lap time you were looking for, you're going to be wanting to get those moves done early. We saw it at Daytona last week where, drivers made up 3-4 positions off the opening lap, but then they were able to build on that with the slipstream in the draft, enabling them to stay close. But as we run through at Long Beach, it's going to be increasingly difficult to make moves through the pack, especially if gaps open up. And this is sure to be quite a tense turn one, and maybe some fireworks into the opening corner.
And only, 15 minutes of racing, so we're probably only talking maybe 9 or 10 laps. As mentioned, of course, they have to navigate their way through this hairpin section before we can drop the green flag and unleash these 18 machines in the Butt Kicker GR Cup. It's a fixed setup competition, and I think you're going to see the pace picked up immediately by your leader as off and away we go here on the streets of the Action City, racing on the streets of Long Beach, and Montenegro going to try and scamper away at the front. We've got single file effectively through the entirety of the field until you get outside of the top 10, where we did have a little bit of chaos through the hairpin for those that had to fight side by side. It's a long run down into the first heavy braking zone though. Mario pops himself to the inside. Mario Cornish fighting with Nelson Santos up towards the fountain section though, single file and safely through. The cars all navigate.
Yeah, you're not going to be wanting to go side by side through this bounding section on the opening lap. Having said that, a couple of late sends further back in the order, just trying to take any position they can off of the start. But then you've got to bounce your way over these curves through the middle sector. Don't launch the car too far. Thought for a second there where you can see a couple of cars sticking their rear end into the tyre barrier. But the top three really starting to scamper away. And really, it looks like it's going to be a battle for fourth rather than third.
Yeah, especially given that they're still just shoving and sliding their way on forwards. Short little run before you make your way onto this back straightaway, and look how much of the inside you can cut through that corner. Got to be very, very brave. Cars bounce around. It's a bumpy street circuit as well, but Montenegro, Santero, David View, 1, 2, and 3, trying now to settle into their rhythm. Give a bit of a shout to some of the drivers that made their way through some of the chaos safely. 3 positions gained for Archie Cole, 2 for Antonio Samuel, a little bit further back in the pack. But here we go, through the hairpin for the first time of asking. Going to see about 90 seconds of the clock complete, and the first lap officially in the books.
Yeah, good starts. We're looking at the left-hand side from the likes of Matthew Mosher up 4, and also the number 7 up 4, up 5 as well. So good starts for them, and Matthew Mosher going up 6 now. So continually good progress being made further back as a couple of drivers maybe pulling into the pit lane with some damage. But up front, really as you were in the early stages, and that big gap, 2.6 seconds back to Archie Cole, really showing that these front 3 do have the pace. For now, of course, we're looking at around 10 laps or so in this race, and we'll have to see if anybody can try and catch back up to the pack.
Let's go back and take a look at some of the chaos that we've seen so far. Hopefully not too much of it. That's Sam Trout in the very green and black entry that you just see just ping-ponging around as they filter on through. There's a number plate on Nikita Ermishin's machine as well. Then you called out a little bit more chaos down through the final couple of corners. That was already Alejandro Sanchez into the wall, and so I'm going to wonder as they dive their way in towards the very, very tight hairpin. He swings out wide, and there's a car already pointed in the wrong direction, and it all goes wrong.
Yeah, and then someone gets spun around as well. It's just not the best corner, is it, for racing the final corner at Long Beach. It's not really designed for side-by-side action, or really for cars facing the wrong direction, as we see here. You're just minding your own business, trying to get your way through, and there's the oncoming traffic, and you do not want to be sitting in it. And luckily enough, I think everyone got through relatively okay. Could have been worse than it was, but unfortunate for those guys at the back that didn't get through.
And that was Dan Howell in the very multicolored entry that went around in his number 9 machine, so he drops down to 14th, but only Nikita Ermishin sits in pit lane, although saying that, he's just rolled away after 2 minutes of damage repair and will fight his way back onto track 2 laps down potentially. You can just see him there popping himself out of pit lane. 1, 2, 3 running at the front, 4, 5, 6 running just behind them. Archie Cole, Nelson Santos 4th, 5th, and then Mario Kunis and Magnus Daublom right behind them. This is where these drivers, I think, already recognize they've lost the grouping up front, and they can afford to fight in and amongst themselves.
Yeah, these guys, I mean, they're a little bit too far back, aren't they, from the leading group at this stage. I mean, we're only, 4 minutes in, but being 4 seconds off the back of the top 3, if you're Archie Cole, really means you're fighting for a P4 position. And being in the number 14 car, I don't think he'll say no to a P4. The I rating will have a little bit of a boost from that one, and a clip of the wall there from Nelson Santos as they make their way through the middle sector. Just shows how difficult it is just to place your car in the perfect way to make your way through these corners, because you're always trying to cut off the apex as much as you possibly can.
You can get away with a little bit more contact than you could in an open wheel machine like we have coming up in a handful of minutes time here. And the second part of Friday Night Primetime, we'll make our way on over to Barcelona with the Super Formula Light. Again, another fixed setup competition, so drivers having to adapt to the machine that they're given rather than anything else. Nelson Santos puts the pressure on to Archie Cole, but could see just a bit too aggressive with the turn in. Hits the inside, almost hits the outside out of that final corner, all as Magnus Dalbom closes from behind. It's now 5 seconds that these drivers have dropped to your race leaders, and as they fly their way down in towards turn number 1 for what will be the 4th time of asking, but 5 minutes complete. David View sits very, very comfortably behind. It's going to take some movement though, a mistake maybe, for a move to be made at the front.
Yeah, these three look relatively okay with sitting in behind each other for now. Montenegro, Santero, and David Vu as well. Just sitting in behind, not really forcing the issue too much, not needing to, because these three still sticking close, not really gapping, or not, the gaps aren't really forming between them at this stage. So it's okay to be sitting in this train. It's all right to be waiting, maybe looking for the move, trying to pressure a mistake, but you know, it might start to kick off in the closing couple of laps. But for now, these guys, they've got this race very much under control, and there's no reason to throw that away.
And while they're not throwing anything away, a little bit of slip-ups further back in the pack once again. Look at the replay, as that's Alex Shibev, and can't quite tell the number on the other car. Might have been Antonio Samuel, who's down on pit lane, come to blows. One more look at it as they send it off in towards turn number 1, and bam, into the wall they go. There's some tires on the right-hand side, but not too much. And then what happens to Magnus Dalbom as we take a look at something for him? Runs his way down out of the fountain section, way too much curb, and ends up pointed in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and I mentioned it at the start of the race, you can really bounce your way across, and you've got to be careful not to offload too much in the car. Oh my word, that was some of the best avoidance I think I've ever seen. That gap was, there was space for a car there, and absolutely nothing else, but that was a very scary moment.
They do tell you to use your F3 relative box on iRacing, and not the greatest of rejoins if we're being honest, and fortunately doesn't cause too much chaos. Great reaction time, and I'm sure some unsavory words may be said underneath of the virtual helmet. Must say, quite like the paint scheme that we've got on that number 3. It looks like a almost cartoon sort of effect on the car. One of those weird things that you can make happen on iRacing by really dialing in stuff. Just more chaos, by the way. That's everything that's happening when we're not looking at our battles behind. Into turn number 1. Oh, Nelson Santos spins himself off around.
And yeah, and then fully around and nearly gets collected as well. It's difficult to avoid these cars, isn't it, on the street circuit, naturally, with there not being too much room. This is going to be the view. Yeah, there's the car. Oh, get out of the way, just about, as you make your way down towards the fountain. But, you know, it's always difficult to pick your way through. I was going to mention, when you were talking about the livery, I mean, David View was asked, what colour would you like your car? And he said purple.
Purple's a good colour.
So it is, but I'm not denying it looks fantastic, but it is very purple.
Again, purple's great. I'm just saying, not that we have a certain series coming up on RaceSpotTV that's going to have a purple logo. So approve of that. You know what Santero's car just reminds me of? It took me a while to place it, but I've been playing a bit of Need for Speed Unbound, its latest release, and it's got this very distinct cartoon art style. It just reminds me of that, and I've got to say, more liveries that do things like this, because it just looks different, it looks unique, and we love a bit of that. We also love, though, when they actually start to fight, and the number 7 car, Thang, going to look up the inside into turn number 1. Nelson Santos going to try and avoid sliding even further down.
Yeah, when we're looking for the move to the inside of Santos, he's got a very damaged front end there, but not damaged enough for him to not confidently make it through turn 1, really applying the brakes late and making sure that he holds the position for P7, and now chasing after the number 4 car. But after the number 4 car, there's a 10-second gap to Kaunis in P5. So realistically, this will be a cap for Santos, and he'd be looking to get his way through sooner rather than later, because you really don't want to be leaving that move too late on and really putting the pressure on yourself to make it in the closing lap or two.
And damage on the front of some of these cars. They've really been through the wars, and I don't think that is just with hitting the walls. That is, again, with some of the car contacts that we've seen. Very, very bouncy, though, once again at the front of the field, and maybe a bit of a breakaway starting to build. We jump on board with David View in the number 2 machine. He winds that car off the steering lock onto the power. And maybe no surprise to see who is at the front. These are the top 3 drivers in terms of I rating. They've been so consistent in terms of hitting their mark so far, but so consistent in not making a mistake either. And with what should be 4 laps to go, I think, I wonder if Ignacio Montenegro just has this race in control right now.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like Santero has too much to offer in this battle. That may just be because that he's just sitting in behind and he really isn't trying to show his hand at all. But, I mean, there's been no move thrown to an inside. There's been no look anywhere. So it just does feel like Montenegro has this under control. But you never know. That could be the tactic that Santero's going for. Oh, my word.
Well, that battle between Juanathana and Santos got very physical down through turn number 1. I'm not quite sure what that was about, but I'm quite glad that neither of them ended up in the wall, and worse for it. Contact down a straight, never what you expect. Back up front, here goes David View, the long way around, running down to East Seaside Way.
Yeah, he's still looking for the move. I was just going to say that I don't know whether Santero is not showing his hand as a tactic, but it doesn't seem that way with David View trying to make his way through as well. So, you know, with the time ticking down, we're looking at, 3 more laps at the end of this one. You know, Vu looking to try and assert his authority, trying to put Valentino Santero off and maybe lose him a bit of time to Montenegro in front.
So, once more, off of the hairpin, 1.2 for your race leader. Is that the margin they need to try and run away? This is a look at what happens. So there's a bit of a bump initially, and then bang, a hip check. That is just not on.
Yeah, I don't think there'll be much defending that way. It looks a I mean, it looked a bit like Nikola Solov in the F3 in Australia practice, but he got away with that pretty lightly. I don't think if there were some very strict stewards in this session that they'd look too kindly on that, but yeah, not what you want to see.
No, and yeah, it was what, a 3-place grid penalty or something, rather minor.
Yeah, that was it.
I can tell you that Juanathana has got, I think, a drive-through for hitting the incident limit potentially, because he has just come down on towards pit lane, but no one else really now within striking distance of one another, maybe with the exception of Magnus Dahlblom and Sam Drought. Full focus, though, just on where Valentino Santero, not that he's slow by any means, just doesn't have the speed to close in your race leader, and it will be 2 laps to go next time by, and David View now sees your race leader breaking away in towards the final couple of corners.
Yeah, Montenegro looking increasingly more confident, just pulling that gap up. Maybe he was playing the games, not showing his hand by holding back a little bit of pace before the end of this race. But he really is now going hammer and tong to try and pull this gap, to try and bring this win home. And it would be a fully deserved one, of course, taking pole position just by a 10th, but to everybody else was a big old gap. So he looks comfortable at the moment, but as a circuit like Long Beach, it could all come undone in an instant. And he's got to be aware of that and make sure he keeps his wits about him.
Not as much chaos as maybe we expected. 18 cars started, maybe going to only see 4 scored off of the leading lap, but definitely still have some battles that have decided to close back on up. Nelson Santos has got Dahlblom in that yellow and blue machine fighting his way forward. Santos loses out as well to Sam Drought, so I wonder if maybe a slowdown penalty, or if that car is just damaged beyond, well, control, and here he comes down onto pit lane. 15 minutes of racing. Seems like it shouldn't be too difficult to avoid mucking up your car too badly, but unfortunately not.
And well, it doesn't help when you right-hand down someone down the straight, in all fairness. So that might be where some critical damage came from. But Santos into the pit lane. That's really going to take out any kind of effectiveness he has in this race. Richard Landreville will go through. Alejandro Sanchez will go through. And probably Ezekiel Priotto as well. So they'll all gain a couple of positions, even though they're not having the best of days. But we're looking at really only 5-6 cars that have kept it out of the wars. So, you know, it really has paid to just keep it clean in this race.
Yeah, and I've been commentating, fortunately, on some dirt racing quite a bit on RaceSpot recently. We've had rallycross, some pro trucks, and we often get to the last chance qualifiers, right, where drivers have basically one more chance to get to the main event, to the feature. And we often just say, you know, stay out of trouble and you'll find yourself making your way forward. And guess what? That tends to hold true a little bit more than it does not. Archie Cole, one that we mentioned, gained a couple of spots, but that 14 machine in a great spot to gain plenty of I rating as well. Remember, drivers are given numbers for each of the sessions based on their I rating, which is the level of strength that iRacing calculates after every race. The higher up you finish relative to your relative strength, the more points you're going to gain. So Ignacio Montenegro, we should have kind of expected this, Dara. We should have expected him to be on pole. We should have expected him to potentially win the race.
That is true, but that being said, I genuinely can't remember how many times I've seen the number 1 car win on Friday Night Primetime this season. It's not been too often, and it shows that even though we do have 1, 2 and 3 in the top 3, Archie Cole is 4th, number 14, Mario Cornish, number 13, is in 5th, so there are always some good performances that you've got to look for some of these guys that may be trying to improve their I rating, will be pleased at how it's going. And we see a couple of times, I think Marcus Armand actually is one of those drivers who was always the number 1, number 2, number 3 car, never was really able to pull out the best result that he could. I'm thinking back, well, maybe even to Winton, but for Montenegro, it's been a fantastic drive and really showing why he's got that number 1 on his car.
I wonder in particular if it's one of those things where sometimes we don't see drivers, in this car particularly often come in and join us. That's happened to David View. Oh, he's hit the tires on the exit of turn 5 and left side into the wall. He spins it around. Unfortunately, doesn't drop off the podium spots, but now is going to drop behind Archie Cole as a result of that, and we will end up seeing the checkered flag. We were wondering if it was going to be the end or not. Ignacio Montenegro dominant here on the streets of Long Beach. Valentino Santero grabs 2nd, and Archie Cole, take a bow, grabs the final podium spot away from David View on the final lap of the race.
Yeah, that's the definition of a nab, isn't it? Wasn't in the top 3 all race long. Give it the last couple of corners and he'll sneak his way onto the podium. David View will not be happy that he's just missed out in the end. Mario Cornish, though, maybe slightly disappointed that he could see the number 2 car in front of him and losing a lot of time, but just wasn't given enough room to be able to get his car through and up into P4. But a fantastic result for Montenegro, and great for Archie Cole as well, the number 14 up in 3rd.
Relatively tame race, all things considered. We've seen more wild races, and I'm sure we'll see plenty more here at Long Beach in the future. Bit of a drag race potentially between Landreville and Sanchez for 10th and 11th spot. Checkered flag still waving from Barney the flagman, who's got nothing on Aaron Likens in the NTT IndyCar flag stand. But there we go. Final couple of drivers will make their way to the line. Just waiting now for Ezekiel Priotto, and we'll be able to grab a look at the race result, and then, oh boy, we got an interesting second part of the doubleheader to come. We'll make our way on over to Barcelona without that terrible chicane at the end of the lap and unleash the Super Formula lights. Here, though, are the official race results, where it's Ignacio Montenegro, the Argentine driver, leading up front, 2.3 seconds at the line from Valentino Santero, and of course Archie Cole grabbing the final spot on the podium away from David View. Final lap, he lost 14 seconds, did the Frenchman. Going to be quite frustrated with what could have been a very simple finish. Mario Cornish 5th in his number 13 entry, and then Nicholas Groff, Magnus Dahlblom, Sam Trout, Dan Hodel, who, of course, we saw in his very distinctive livery spun around in the opening stages, still within 40 seconds at the end, and then Richard Landreville completes the top 10. Alejandro Sanchez down in 11th spot with Nelson Santos scored behind him. Ezekiel Priotto, then the final driver on the lead lap, interestingly, with Alex Shibev actually finishing, albeit having a couple of spills to be 1 lap down, alongside Nikita Ermishin. And then Theng Wan Watana having a couple of issues, let's be honest, with some of the other drivers down 3 laps with Antonio Samuel and then Matthew Mosier, the rest of the drivers that took to the start. Next time we go racing, though, I do believe it is going to be a wild one. We went to Road Atlanta for VCO Infinity, and with the Mazda MX-5s, we saw plenty of action. I think when we head there with the Toyota GR86s, Dara, it will be no different.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be a fantastic circuit. Always throws up an interesting race at Road Atlanta. It's a narrow track, but it does offer up some overtaking opportunities, particularly in cars such as this. You think down at turn 1, you even think down at the turn 10 chicane, and through turn 6 and 7 as well. So lots and lots of room for some moves to be made, and I'm really looking forward to it next week.
And a quick look once again at the schedule, because after that, Snetterton and then the trip down under, Sandown and Mount Panorama to come. What a season finale we'll have as well, a trip to the mountain. And I think these GR86s, you know, it's where these drivers really develop racecraft in many ways. From a tight, twisty street circuit to Road Atlanta and Snetterton, I think we're going to see the drivers have to be a bit more, let's say, wise as to how they race and understand the draft patterns. But it's one of those tracks that I think in front of us the next handful of weeks, there's plenty of intrigue for us. As mentioned, though, second part of the doubleheader still to come. Don't go anywhere here on RaceSpotTV. We'll be right back after a trip across the pond with the Toyota GR86s swapping out for the Super Formula Lights.
There might be some rain coming through. We expect rain soon. Rain is close. The session has been declared wet. No sign of this rain stopping. Rain is clearing up. Rain should be gone for now. Nothing but sunshine all day.
Well, we've made our way across the pond and the heavens have opened, although maybe not as much as we would like. Welcome to a damp and soggy Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. Not something I bet is often said in the real world. Delighted you could join us here again on RaceSpotTV for the second part of the doubleheader. We unload the Super Formula Light fixed setup competition, and maybe most importantly of all, it is with the historic layout, no terrible chicane to have it to navigate your way on through. One thing that I can tell you right now is that drivers are struggling in qualifying, and Dara, 23 drivers in the session right now. We've got 2 minutes left to go. Only 9 drivers sit on the board.
Yeah, and of those times on the board, those 9 drivers make that 10 now, so by 8.6 seconds. So there's quite a split between the top and the bottom at the moment. It's going to be quite an enthralling race, and we've lucked out with the rain. There's only 1 day of rain forecasted in the next 2 weeks in Barcelona, in the real world. So we've definitely got lucky, and this is surely going to be some exciting racing.
Well, I can also tell you is that while there is rain predicted right now, it is going to start to tail away. So I'm not sure what we're going to see when we jump into the race itself. Here's a look, though, at the schedule for these drivers. Last time out at the Hungaroring, it was quite fun, let's be honest, but it's not necessarily a track where drivers know that passing is going to be readily available. God, say that one 5 times fast. We work our way through the rest of the season, though, and I think we've got some of those tracks where we're going to see lots of draft once again. Algarve to Portimao will go in a week's time. Maybe Suzuka is going to be a little bit more tight and twisty, but to the Lone Star State and then up to upstate New York we will go. And they say that everything's bigger in Texas. Watkins Glen with the classic blue layout. I'll tell you right now, Dara, that's going to be one slipstream draft fair.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, we had Algarve, of course, at VCU Infinity just a couple of weeks ago, and that was quite an exciting race. Suzuka, of course, it's going to be made for these cars, of course, these being and the Super Formula Lights cars. Of course, they would be taking like a duck to water in the Japanese conditions. Circuit America is, of course, a great track for racing in whatever car you're in. And Watkins Glen, to close out the season, we are going to be treated on the final day. That is absolutely for sure. But here in Barcelona, I don't know what to expect. The times look sparse. The cars are going to be having to get a move on quite quickly. And with only 12 times on the board, half of the grid is just going to be starting in their I-rating order.
I get the sense, right, that this sort of race is going to be about who stays out of trouble for the most part, especially once we see the margins. Qualifying has come to a close, and quite abruptly as well. Drivers instantly escorted down to the grid. Let's take you trackside and run you down through the starting grid for what is bound to be a race of attrition and a race of changeable conditions with Margarita Villacha at the front of the field with a 1:44.838. He's alongside Mex Janssen, who's a second off the pace. What a big gap on the front row. And then Callum Voisin a full second further back will try and bring that real-world experience to the forefront alongside Brandon Rosebar in the Hydro Race Geodesic racing machine. Andrew Petty and then Alex Pilbeam share row 3, with 7th seeing Connor Scudol rolling for Gabor Majoros alongside Remy Leloirne and Stuart Wilson, 9th and 10th positions, with Daniel Fernandez and Sebastian Cohn-Von-Yaski, 11th and 12th respectively. 13th for Benjamin Frigiero. I'm not quite sure what that livery is meant to be. He's alongside Matteo Frigiero, siblings who have raced for Race Clutch in the past, and then Javier Perez and then Mario Custa behind them. Manuel Gonzalez in a Porsche Super Formula Light is alongside Titan Hoduebert. The first couple of cars, of course, with no time on the board and all being ordered by their I-rating. Cesar Peralta, Tony Dibden, Marcis Putniks, and then Isaac Ruska and Adriel Del Piccolo round out the 23 cars. Once again, the weekly butchering continues, but I think this start, one that drivers are just hoping they can be as tentative as possible on and dare afford any sort of wheel spin.
Yeah, that's going to be difficult to avoid the wheel spin. I mean, it's going to be a very tricky 20 minutes worth of racing. Exciting 20 minutes, I'm sure, for us up here in the commentary booth. But for the guys on the track, the opening lap is going to be absolutely hectic. Just going to try and make their way through without losing too much time or positions. But this is looking set to be quite an exciting race on Friday Night Primetime.
And you can see that the field seems to be basically, for the most part, all on the wet tires. I don't think anyone is gambling on trying the dry compounds out. The engines will rev, the drivers turn their attention to the lights, and we get ready to go with a damp and the soggy Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya. Away we go, and 3 wide in the heart of the pack. 3 wide at the front. Callum Voisin with a rocket of the launch. He will take the lead down into the opening corner. 3 wide though. Who's going to be brave on the brakes? There's a big wiggle on the inside. 1 car goes into the grass. There's going to be a chaos shortly for a handful as we filter up through the second pod. Voisin goes around. It's Frigero that goes up and over. I mean, hellacious sorts of scenes, but at the front, Max Janssen tries to run away.
Yeah, looking at the timing screens, Javier Perez up in P5 has gained 10 positions in 3 corners. Similarly, Isaac Ruska up 12 in the same time. So just picking your way through means that you can avoid all this carnage that we're seeing. But Max Janssen's going to be pleased to see it all happen behind him. He's got more than a second's worth of an advantage. Andrew Petty's not going to allow him to get away easily, though. But they're still going to fight their way through this middle sector side by side. But what a start. What crazy scenes we saw at the opening chicane.
Oh, it's a bit deep there from Andrew Petty, but maybe that's just going a little bit wide to avoid running on the racing line itself. Remember, you see these drivers running some slightly different lines to normal, just trying to get off of the worn-off part of the track and to where the water flows a little bit more naturally. Voisin's gone around again, I can tell you that, so I think there was a bit of damage from the opening couple of corners, but you can see the spray being kicked up into this longer hairpin that will navigate our way around. Brandon Rosberg sends it and holds on to his car as well, nice and confident. Slightly further up front, Javier Perez now in a podium spot as he gets up to 3rd. Petty spins in front of him though. Chaos here at the front.
Javier Perez, Christmas has come, what, 7 months early for Javier Perez, because he is up 13 positions on the opening lap after starting in the back half of the grid. Being up to 2nd is absolutely insane. Isaac Ruska as well, 22nd to 7th is an incredible start, and as well for Putniks up at 10. So you look at the back, some of the drivers down 15, 20 positions. They've had awful getaways, but some of these guys, they have been right in the wars. They've been in the thick of it. They have been going side by side almost all the way through this opening lap, making up all the positions they can. Having said that, people like Brandon Roseborough hasn't gained or lost anything somehow, despite all the carnage that we've seen, still in 4th.
He's had to really fight his way back as well. By no means has he been gifted this. Oh, Ruska's off. Long right-hand sweeper through turn 3. And unfortunately into the wall hard, and surely will have to bring his car down to pit lane. Even though iRacing slightly increased the amount of visibility that you get, look how difficult it is. We're riding at the top of the car effectively right now. There is, a lot more spray lower down. This is sort of the perspective that the drivers have, really trying to look to the side effectively to find your references.
Yeah, just going to get the better exit, just trying to find where the driver in front isn't going to try and apply that throttle to really take advantage, maybe of a little bit of a mistake. Here's Roseborough right on the back of Scoodle, who is just not looking the most comfortable. A couple of wide lines through 7, 8, and then through 9. Outside line for 10. Can he stick it all the way around here in the wet and wild conditions? You bet he's going to try. Ooh, nearly puts it into the grass, but the traction's going to allow him to get back up past and into P3, and he can start to chase after Javier Perez, who himself is on it to catch Max Janssen.
2.7 seconds that margin. I think Max Janssen at this point can just relax and not try and overdrive the car. We've got Frigero down on pit lane, Benjamin and Matteo, unfortunately, and then alongside our pole sitter. That's 3 drivers sitting in pit lane and now watching on from the sidelines. Oh, you're not meant to be at that part of the track, unfortunately, and Hudaber is going to slide back, well, in a very dangerous fashion on the inside through the fast final corner, and now going to stack them all up and send them almost 4 wide with 1 car dipping 2 wheels off into the grass. Callum Voisin part of this battle for 15th spot. They're not giving anything up on the run down to turn number 1.
This is absolutely crazy to see the 4 cars plummeting their way down the hill in towards turn 1. Can they all make it through unscathed? Oh, the answer is no. Oh, there's another car there. Where's that car?
What?
Sorry.
No, what? Okay, we have taken a look at absolutely 0 replays so far today. Let's start by going back to the opening corner where, well, Callum Voisin goes around and then Matteo Frigero ends up barreling over. I mean, I'm not quite seeing chaos like that much, but I think we shouldn't have been too surprised on the start to have seen that, should we, Tara?
No, I don't think I quite expect to see a car launch into the air and over, but we can see here that little bit of contact, then the concertina effect, everyone comes together, and over you go, bouncing over, there's the barrel roll. All acrobatic. I'm sorry, I still can't get over the fact that we... that is quite the view, isn't it, through turn 2. But yeah, for the drivers that were just able to pick their way through and avoid all the carnage, they've really gained big, and Javier Perez is one of those drivers who just managed to make his way through. But I still can't get over the fact that we just watched a car appear into the middle of a crash.
We'll slowly work our way through a handful of replays. There's how one of the Frigeros ended up retiring. This is then how Matteo did. Yeah, no, that's just being on the curb as well. That's a little simple, lazy almost mistake to make, and being clumsy. Oh, I've had my fair share of giggles on RaceSpotTV, but never quite like that.
No. Let's see it now. This should be the battle as they come down towards turn 1. Though I promise you there are 4 cars there. It disappears. Oh, and there it is again. There we go. That's why. He was there all along. He just put his invisibility cloak on the car, and we just couldn't see it. But down in towards turn 1, I think this is on board with Callum Boysen, getting a little bit sandwiched. Oh, there's apparently a car there. There he is. Callum Boysen slips up the inside.
That is the world's greatest lag switch that we've ever seen. Oh, no. I don't think Callum Boysen got much further, unfortunately.
No, he did. I mean, he'd have been counting his lucky stars after getting through at turn 2 with just, you know, phantom contact and then a yellow car appearing. But then just about lost the car in the end. But this has been quite a race. I mean, I have to say, I did a broadcast earlier on today in the small hours here where it was 37 cars at Laguna Seca and mixed. What's the word I'm looking for? Hypercars and LMGT3. So different categories, but that doesn't compare anything to what I've just seen in this race so far.
I mean, I got to do the first Super Formula Light race that we had in VCO Infinity at Algarve, and it was very, very wet, and it was very, very slippery, and poor Manuel Gonzalez goes around and drops behind not 1, not 2, but 3 different drivers as a result, because there goes Brandon Roseborough as well. HydroRace Geodesic Racing going to slip on through and take advantage. And, well, he's still up 8 positions from where he qualified. But there is just something about these rain conditions where I don't know if this is necessarily the case here today, but definitely when we were at Portimao in VCO Infinity, in some ways the conditions were raining so heavily, Dara, that in the real world they might have actually red flagged it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of the scenes that we have seen, not just in VCO Infinity, but even here on Friday Night Primetime, they definitely would have waved the red flag. There's just far too much standing water on the racetrack for it to be at all deemed safe. But when it is this, well, this would be safe, clearly. As we're seeing Isaac Ruska wide at turn 4.
You were saying?
Yep, exactly. It's dry enough, but we're still getting this great action.
Oh, we've had 23 cars who started, only 17 are left out there and running, which I'll be honest, given how much we've had in terms of drama, might actually be a little bit higher than I thought we might have had. This is Brandon Roseborough, who's now slipped backwards again through the field in that HydroRace Geodesic car, trying to fight his way and claw his way back up through the field, but all as Mex Janssen. Haven't talked much about him. You know, we talked about Javier Perez, 13 positions gained since the start. Mex Janssen out of the final corner, almost halfway through, hasn't put a foot wrong.
No, and he's just not really had to look back, has he? I mean, he led the first lap by 6 seconds, which helped. I mean, he's not really been able to gain on that since Javier Perez has been there or thereabouts in terms of matching the pace, but Mex Janssen, he has just had a cruise of an afternoon, nearly halfway through. He'll probably just be counting down the minutes and, you know, wondering what he's going to have for tea afterwards, because he's really not been pressured. He's not really had anything to worry about. Though, having said that, I can't imagine every driver will get through this race without an incident. Oh, sorry, not every driver. Any driver can get through this race without an incident, so I'm waiting to see if something will happen for Mex.
Even if it's like a half scare, right? That's the thing. You'll just be offline on the curb or something and make that slight slip up, fight for the final step of the podium, starting to intensify as Remy Leloirne is just putting that pressure on. Spray, of course, just hindering the visibility. What happened, though, I did see that for Isaac Ruska, dropped down the order slightly. This is Up through the top of the long right-hander, and he gets onto the curb. He's not the only one. Sympathy spin from, I believe that's Manuel Gonzalez, and good avoidance there from a couple of cars just slipping on through.
Yeah, I mean, this race has just been about not hitting the cars that are having an incident, really, hasn't it? It's not really been about what kind of pace you can have. It's can you keep it on the tarmac? Can you not hit the cars who haven't been able to keep it on the tarmac? Oh, yeah. And that's a case where they weren't able to avoid, because I think maybe a little bit of trepidation going through that corner, seeing that there were cars spinning ahead, wanting to get a better exit off the corner to make sure that they didn't hit the car, and in doing so, spun themselves. So, you know, it's never easy in these conditions, is it? And I think we're seeing it plain and simple here, that a lot of these drivers just not able at this stage of the race to get through this race without any kind of hiccups. But it's not that you can blame them, because these conditions are far from easy.
For what it's worth, this is meant to be on the lighter scale of rain that iRacing has available, and Remy Leloir's just made a mistake and slipped up through the final sector. Oh, frustration, I'm sure, for him. Now, who does that promote into that chance to fight for the podium? It's Gabor Majoros that now sits in fourth in the hot seat. We'll have to grab a look at what happened, because I wasn't quite able to pick it up on the live viewing. His student driver machine clearly needing the student plates.
Yes, a little bit harsh there, aren't you?
That's a delivery.
Yeah. No, I know. It was a good line, to be fair. But yeah, absolutely, not the best of showings there through the middle of the corner. Just going through, having a lovely time. A little bit too much power on the car, and there's the rear end going around and saying goodbye. I want to face the wrong way, and it's going to take a little bit of effort to get yourself out of that one. But you know, everyone having their own fair share of little moments, little incidents, little scares. But as we were mentioning, Max Janssen's just had absolutely none of it. He's 8 seconds in the lead. He leads P3 by 24 seconds in 12 minutes. I mean, it's just simply been incredible.
And don't forget, you know, watching so many of these spins, I like to call it right foot traction control that you somehow need to activate in these conditions, and just be aware of exactly what the car is doing on board with Brandon Roseborough that rides behind Alex Pilbeam up to the top of this long right-hander, where we've already seen a handful of cars, not one, not two, but three, make a mistake on the curb. Tell you what, Roseborough got all sorts of crotch stuff before he even got over the crest there. Car got light, car went around almost on him, and quick hands, he saves it, unlike, I think, poor Remy Leloir, who's dropped down a couple more spots, now down to 10th.
Yeah, he has dropped a couple more spots. I mean, it's unfortunate for him to have done that, but at the same time, I'm sure there's going to be chances to gain them back again into the gravel. Deep, and yeah, you're going to find a wall there if you're not careful. But just about getting it back onto the tarmac. But this is an exploration evening, isn't it? Some of these drivers are finding parts of this Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya that they never knew existed before. And
it wasn't a bad job, especially remember, gravel slows the cars down quite significantly now on iRacing. Wet gravel even more so, able to roll that momentum through and avoid getting too bogged down. There is your race leader, who has had some little bits of traffic, who have headed back out onto track. Andrew Petty amongst a handful, Sebastian Cohn van Jaski as well. But you know, there were two drivers that decided, let me start in pit lane. Turn one's going to be chaos. I think it might be wise for me to try and stay out of that. So Cesar Peralta is now up into 8th position. Not a bad thing, all things considered, starting on pit lane, especially when you get a car spinning in front of you. And as Matt Malone would say, freebies.
Yeah, and a freebie there for Remy in P8, who of course lost the positions himself and is now gaining them back from everybody else making the errors. So for all of these guys, they're just going to be thinking, yay, I've got another free position, but then remembering, well, hang on, well, that could easily be me in about a minute's time. So they've got to be careful. But Peralta, again, he's been another one of those drivers just keeping the nose clean, not really having too many issues over the last 5-10 minutes. And it's reaping him rewards up into P7 now. And yeah, it's just so interesting. I mean, we were talking at Long Beach as well, weren't we, about how the iRating doesn't necessarily reflect the result. And we had 1, 2, 3 up in 1, 2, 3. I mean, the top three now, number 2, number 6, and number 14. So it does show that when the conditions become a little bit trickier, you don't always get what you'd expect.
I think as well, you know, I'm not sure how much Matteo Frigero and Benjamin Frigero, you know, 1 and 4 iRating cars in particular, do drive this machine. I've seen them more in prototypes, and you know, there's some similarities, but as many prototype drivers were saying when they crossed over for VCO Infinity, it's a very different sort of machine, and they had all sorts of excuses, so I'm going to at least believe them somewhat. Oh no, more chaos up at that long right-hander. and 2 cars into the wall, and then Manuel Gonzalez forces some drivers to take very, very significant avoiding action.
Yeah, let's see it on board here as they come through. Oh, yeah, there's nothing you can do there, is there? You are. You see the car in front of you, and there's the half a second where you think, this isn't going to end well for me. And there's nothing you can do to avoid it. And it's just how the cookie crumbles. But yeah, it's annoying when you're in that situation because you've done nothing wrong and there's nothing you can do. But at the same time, you're at peace with the fact that, you know, you couldn't have improved the situation by doing anything different because you were damned if you did, damned if you didn't.
Less than 5 minutes ago, we checked back in with your race leader who's going to cross the line. Lap times around 1:44s now, not really pushing by any means, and I suspect 3 laps to go this time by. Don't quote me on that, but I feel somewhat confident. Look how he as well is staying off of the curbing, not wanting to be too risky at this stage, and just slowly, methodically works his way through. Back up over to some fights that we've got brewing. It's for 5th position that Brandon Roseborough now finds himself on the back of Alex Pilbeam, up through the final sector, having fought their way past some traffic as well. Just see them keeping off the racing line, arcing the corner a little bit more, and now Roseborough just waiting onto the main straight to try and slingshot his way on forward.
Yeah, let's see if he can do it through the final corner. It's funny that on the back of that livery it says, please no scary dives. We may not have seen too many scary dives in this race, but there's been a lot of scary moments regardless. Roseborough won't need to dive the car. He has the inside line, will easily control it on the run down in towards turn 1. Just needs to make sure that he doesn't brake too late on the wet stuff and allow Pilgrim to roll it back around the outside. But Roseborough on the inside, going to claim the corner, but going a little bit deeper himself. Means that Alex Pilbeam can't really get that momentum round the outside, and Roseborough back up into P5.
Remember, braking zone downhill into the opening corner, so it's always a little bit more tricky. If you brake a bit too deep, gravity doesn't help you. It works against you as you fall away into the braking zone, but 3 seconds up to Gabor Majoros, who has now closed the margin up to Connor Scoodle for the final step on the podium. Really goes out wide, does the number 5 machine as well, as they work their way through this middle sector. You just see what's he going to do in terms of this crucial corner in many ways, because the speed that you carry up the hill is what you then bring through this right-hander that we've seen so much trouble so far. Closes up just that little bit more within 6/10 or so, and very, very calmly over the crest. You can see, not working the car too hard, exactly what he wants to be doing.
Yeah, just making sure that he rotates the car enough and gets it exactly where he needs to do without overdriving the car, because that is a risk in these conditions, because you can start to, you know, try and push the throttle a little bit harder than you really should be or could be doing, and then you just start to snowball those little mistakes. You just try and push a little bit more and more. So just keeping the car under control, keeping yourself under wraps in terms of making sure that you're not making too many errors, making sure that you can get to the end nicely, is one of the biggest challenges in conditions such as this. I mean, Connor Scoodle in P3 would be loving this result, despite being half a minute off the leader. He'd love to defend his position to Gabor here, but I don't know how hard he would defend it, especially considering that, you know, if there's contact, he'd lose a lot of I rating that he's currently gaining.
And you're talking about some slip-ups. I've seen Alex Pilbeam off the track, Remy Leloir off the track a handful of times as well, and maybe more significantly, Javier Perez had a bit of a slip-up, lost almost 7 full seconds. Let's check out what happened to him in that very bright red machine as he heads up through the first right-hander that then carries you into the final double right-hander. Fast, committed section, and I'm not sure if he hits a puddle and aquaplanes or something, but you see the snap of oversteer, has to slow down, bring the momentum back onto track. Scary moment, really didn't lose too much time in hindsight.
And it was one of those moments where you can just see, you can always just envisage yourself using your steering wheel and then having a big old snap and then having your heart skip a beat. So I think we've all been there. But he very well caught for Javier Perez. Very much could have gone worse, could have been spinning around and maybe looking more at Connor Scoodle and Gabor Majoros in this battle, despite being now still 19 seconds in front. But with only one more lap to go at the end of this one, you know, time is running out for Connor Scoodle to make a big enough mistake for Gabor here to make his way back up onto the podium.
And you feel as though there may be a couple of dives being sent on that final lap if there is a little bit of a slip up. And again, just to confirm, your race leader so far clear that he is already working through the opening couple of corners. 30 seconds then back to this battle that is going to cross the line. well, right around as the clock strikes 0. Now there's some draft at work here, but remember, this is a fixed setup competition in the Super Formula Light Series. There's open and fixed setups available. This allows the drivers to jump in and get a feel for the car quite quickly, not need to get up to speed with making the car go the way it needs to as well. Down through the opening corner, bit deep through the brakes goes Gabor Majoros, but Connor Scudo gives him the room, forces him the long way around, and in this fight for third position, Brandon Roseborough is closing up as well.
Yeah, if these two make any kind of mistake when it comes to the fight with each other, Roseborough is going to be right there to take advantage and maybe sneak himself back onto the podium through, though, turn 4. Conor Scoodle looks like he's got it more under control than he did just a couple of corners ago, but just one little error, one little bit of mistraction through the exit of a corner can really just allow Gabba to be back onto the rear wing once again. But the corners are ticking down now with, half a lap to go.
And I can tell you Javier Perez has gone off the track once again. Such is the amount that he is pushing. So, he's got the gap behind. He was going maybe for a fastest lap, not going to go his way. For Max Jansen, though, what a blinder. Flag to flag victory after all of the chaos that departed behind. And the opening lap was no match for him. He comes out on top in a damp and soggy circuit to Barcelona, Catalunya. Gabor Majoros has got through and now off into the kitty litter. Conor Scudo will scamper on through, reclaim his third spot, and Brandon Roseborough follows through as well. Couple more corners to go. Conor Scudo's had a memorable drive to work his way on forward. Brandon Roseborough slips and slides on the curb in the quest to try and close on down. An entertaining race for some, but I'm sure 20 minutes done and dusted, they're going to exit their sim rigs in a puddle of sweat.
Yeah, well, if they weren't already in a puddle of water, just in the spray of the cars in front of them. Conor Scoodle, fantastic work from him to pick off P3. A great result, and he'll be over the moon with that one. It looked for all the world that Gabba had that move done, but in doing so, to the inside at turn 10, went a little bit too deep onto the brakes, lost the car, lost the position, and then lost another one to boot to Brandon Roseborough as well. But, great racing that we've had in the 20 minutes here. We've still got cars going around, and in the end, 11 cars on the lead lap. Incredible.
It gives us, I think, as well, the bit of expectation that more of these changeable conditions in the future, maybe we will start to see drivers begin to get more comfortable, but you're never going to be able to just jump into a rain race and say, you know what, I'm up to speed and I know exactly what needs to be done. Final few drivers will come to the line, and now I'm really, really hoping when we go racing next week at Portimao, it's as wet and as soggy as it was here today. Drag race to the line between Tony Dibden and Marcus Petetniks, but 71 thousandths will split them at the very end. Both drivers gaining 10 positions in what was a very, very difficult race for some to just survive in. Max Jansen survived best of all, though, 19.5 seconds clear of Javier Perez. 2 slip-ups on the closing couple of laps drop him back, but very much took advantage to gain 13 spots in the opening couple of corners. Conor Scoodle holds off Brandon Roseborough and Gabor Majoros for a podium spot, with Alex Pilbeam, Cesar Peralta, and then Remy Leloin, Mario Cuesta, and then Tony Dibden, your top 10. Marcus Petetniks behind, and then Titouan Hudebert at 12th, Stuart Wilson, Sebastian Cohn-Woniawski, and then Daniel Fernandez, Manuel Gonzalez, Andrew Petty, Isaac Gruska, Andrea De Piccolo, and then Callum Boysen, as we get into the drivers that really did not enjoy this race through your top 20. The Frageros, Matteo in front of Benjamin, and then Margarada Villacha. The pole sitter unfortunately got tangled up through all of the chaos in the opening couple of laps. And maybe you won't expect it to be raining and, damp when we make our way to Algarve, but, based on today, Dara, never say never, especially after we saw some great racing with this combo during VTO Infinity.
Yeah, and it was wet during that, wasn't it? So don't rule it out. Of course, it's going to be an incredibly exciting race. It's a track that I think really suits these Super Formula Lights, with enough straights and then enough overtaking opportunities, being able to go side by side through quite a bit of this circuit, particularly through that middle sector in these nice little nippy cars. So, yeah, looking forward to it next week, and we really do have some great little double headers over the next month or so.
And not long now left in this Friday night primetime schedule, but like you mentioned, the double headers to continue. And here's a look at what we've got coming up ahead of us. Road America started off the season. We'll return to U.S. shores to close off with a trip to the Circuit of the Americas, as well as Watkins Glen, but Algarve, Suzuka in the interim to come, and boy, should it be exciting. Don't forget to stick around here on RaceSpotTV for all of that. For now, though, it is time to bid you farewell. For the team behind the scenes, for Dara Thacker alongside myself, Arjuna Kankipati, thanks so much for joining us. Always enjoy these two-part races, the Toyota GR86s and the Super Formula Lights. With fixed setup competition, always brings a little bit of chaos, as does the rain. We'll see you next week. For now, so long and goodbye.